All right. Let's step into this object-oriented programming. Okay. So, what is object-oriented programming? Okay. I hope you all can see the screen, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes,
So,
sir.
OOPS in short, it is basically OOPS is a short term for object-oriented
Program.
programming. So, what is object-oriented programming? So so far, like, whatever we have learned is basically procedure-oriented programming. Procedure-oriented programming. Procedure meaning functions. Procedure meaning functions. So when we say whatever we have written so far, like, we have written functions for the code reusability and we got things done, right? Now that is a procedure oriented programming. So there are two concepts, procedure oriented programming and object oriented programming. So Python has both. Python has procedure oriented as well as the object oriented. Okay, whereas Java, it is strictly object oriented. Java is not procedure oriented. Okay, so every thing that we create in Java needs to have a class, needs to have its own object oriented structure. But whereas Python, you can just write things without a class, with class, it just works. So meaning Python is both procedure as well as the object oriented programming language. Okay. Now, people were you earlier when it comes to C, right? So there were the evolution of programming is something like this. So initially there was assembly language, and later when it comes to a proper readable programming language, more user-friendly programming language, the first one was C, right? So when the C came, so it was purely procedure-oriented programming, right? It was purely procedure, only functions. You write functions and you reuse the functions, right? And functions has a scope, right? What is the scope in the functions? What is a local variable? What is a global variable? Right. So that is how that is how the state was maintained in the functions. The state as in the life of these variables, what is the data that is holding in that variables are local to the functions. Okay, the state was maintained at a function level. And later the even programming gets evolved day by day, right? So it was little with respect to the C is very fast and all of that. But when it comes to handling of the little larger data, it became little complex. So then later became what the programming language that we got, a C++, which is basically supports both procedure and object oriented programming language, right? Procedure as well as object oriented. Right, in the same line, there are a lot of other languages came in. Then came Java. Then Java said, like, I will only support object oriented. Right. Then came Python. Python again says I will support both procedure as well as object oriented programming. Right, so it all comes with a different concepts, but it is all whatever OOPS is the evolution that is built on top of, like, the procedure oriented. So initially there was procedure, then there were certain problems, then people wanted to address, they came up with something called object oriented programming. Now, what was the problem and how they addressed is something that we are going to see. Right. Now, procedure oriented as in it's all functions, The state is maintained only at the function level. Now, people then like, they started, we have to need more data security, more of a data isolation. Then they came up with something called object oriented programming. Now, what is an object in real life? Everything that you see around is an object. Like, take a chair,
Yes, sir.
take a pen, right? Take a car, right? Take a laptop. So everything is object around us, right? Everything, a person, right? When it comes to now, see, in today's world, you kind of represent if you open Amazon, so you have so many products. It's all real world products, right? As in the physical products that they represent in the UI, they represent in the website, right? May it be a mobile, may it be a laptop, may it be some any product. These are all physical products, yes,
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
right? But they are being represented in the through via the software application.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so if see, right, so these are all the physical products that are being represented in the software application. As in, those are all actual objects, right? Now, whenever there is an object, if I talk about chair as an object, what are the properties of a chair? Let's forget. What are the properties of a pen? So obviously you have a brand of a pen, Reynolds, Click, and there are different pen brands. Then obviously you have color, right? Is it a Click pen or is it a cap pen, right? Is it a ink pen or is it a refill pen, right? Is it what is the type of the point? Ball point or some other? You have some other options, right? So there are, if even if I talk about a pen, pen is a very generalized term. Yes, there can be different types of pens, different brands of pen, different colors of pen. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
So
Yes.
these are all the
Yes, sir.
properties. These are all the properties of an object. Let's talk about chair, right? There are chairs with what are how many legs does the chair have? Let us say four. What is the color, right? What is the brand? Is it a wheelie? Does the chair has wheels, right? Right. So these are all again, see, we are talking about chair. Chair is again a generalized term. There are different varieties of chair. How do I represent the chair? How do I represent the chair in software? So I have to come up, list down all the properties that a chair has, right? I have to list down all the properties of a chair. If I talk about car, car is again, there are a lot of things about car, right? So what is the brand of the car? What is the color of the car? What is the, is it automatic or manual? If at all, if it is a manual, how many gears does it have? How many wheels? What is the type of a wheel? Right? Is it a sports car or not? Is it an SUV? Is it a compact? So you have so many properties. So why am I telling all of this? Now, if I have to represent, a car or a chair or a pen or a person or a bird in software, I have to treat them like an object. I have to collect all those properties. I have to collect all the behaviors. Right, with procedure oriented, if I have to do this, it will be more and more complex. But whereas with the object oriented programming, I can do this with much more much more sensible way. Okay, now that is where we require object oriented programming in order to represent the real world objects in much more sensible way. Okay. Now, when it comes to object-oriented programming, there are certain terminologies that we have to understand. So in object-oriented, we have something called class. Then we have something called object. Then we have something called instance. Okay. Object and instance, you can just say one and the same, right? Then you have object creation or instantiation. Object creation or instantiation. Right? Class, object, instance, instantiation. Right? We have a lot of other things that we follow. Right? Now, first one we will see what is a class. Class is a short term for the term classification. Short class is a short term for the term called classification. Right? Now, if I have to classify cars. So for example, I will say, let us go with a class called bird. So I will say I'm going to create a class called bird. OK, this is the syntax that I'm going to create a class. This is the class is the keyword that is built in. Class is a keyword. OK, class is a keyword that is built in. So if you are creating a class, you have to use a term called class. That helps us to create a class. Now, what is a class? Obviously, in schools or in colleges, you have classes, right? So what does a class contain? What does the class mean? Right, so ECE, let us say there is one class. CSC, there is another class, right? IT, there is another class. MEC, there is another class. Yes, what exactly are we trying to do here when I say this is class, this is one other class, this is another class, this is another class? What exactly are we doing here?
Collection of objects.
Right, students of one branch are put into one class. Yes,
Yes, sir.
all MEC
Yes, sir.
students will be in the class MEC. All ECE students will be in the class ECE. All CSC students will be in the class CSC. All first standard students are in class first standard. Right? All class students of class second standard are in class 2 and so on. Right? So what are we trying to do? We are segregating, we are grouping certain people into one particular class. So we are classifying people based on branch, based on sections, based on classes. Right. So now in the same way, we are creating a class called bird, where we can create many objects of different birds, We'll see. First, let us try to list the properties of a bird. What are the properties of a bird? Tell me what are the properties of a bird? Bird has eyes. Bird has legs. Bird has color. Yes
Wings.
or no? Birds can
Yes,
fly,
sir.
right? Birds can fly. Now, birds also has breed. Like there is pigeon, there is parrots, or like species or a breed, whatever you want to call it. So let's just go with a very basic things, right? So this let us say these are all the properties of a bird. With these properties, can I create only one bird, or I can represent any bird here?
Can represent any birds.
I
Many
can
birds.
represent any bird. So what
Many
I'm going to say
birds.
is, I'm going to say eyes is equal to 2, right? Legs is equal to 2. Color is equal to, right? I'm just going to say green for now, right? Can it fly? Obviously, bird can fly. I'm going to say true, right? And breed, bird type or whatever, right? So I'm just going to say parrot here, right? Now, this is the class that I have created by providing certain properties and assigning a respective values to it. Now, if you see here, I have hard coded something called parrot here. So this bird class is always going to, the bird class is always going to create a parrot object. Now, we can change this behavior. We can change this behavior, right? Right, we can change this behavior. Now, what I'm going to do is once after creating a class, using the class, I should be able to create objects using this class, because this class I have to design in such a way that it remains generic, that it remains generic. What do I mean by generic? Meaning generic means it is like general. I can create any object using this class. I can create any object using this class. Okay. Now with this bird class, I've just made it very generic. Now I have to create an object. So what do I mean by object is, right? I am going to create a tiny object using this class. I'm going to create one object using this class. A class is a mere representation of an object. A class is a representation of a object. Okay. A class is a representation of a real world object. Okay. Now using the class, I can create different objects or different instances, Now, how do I do that? Is there is a particular syntax on how to create an object. X is equal to, I have write a class name followed by parenthesis. This is just like a function call. Okay, this is just like a function call, the way we call a function. Now this, what it does, it creates an object. It creates an object. This syntax will create an object. Now what it does, right? So this in the memory, right? It will create one object called X and it has got certain properties. What are the properties here, right? It has got eyes, it has got legs, it has got color. So many these parameters, whatever we have written. Now those parameters are maintained in this object, in this location, in this location. Now I can create one more object and say bird. Now here X dot breed, I will say parrot, right? Here another I will say y dot color is equal to black and y dot breed is equal to crow. Right, I have created two objects here in the same memory. I have created two objects. One is our X, right? Another one is our Y. Right. So X, what does the values it has? It has got legs 2, right? Color green or breed parrot and eyes 2 and so on. But whereas what does Y have? Y have legs 2, eyes 2. What is the color here?
Blacks.
Blacks.
Right. If you see here, there are two objects I have created using the same class. Using the same class. And one, it is green and color is green and breed is parrot. Another case, the color is black and the breed is crow. Now, this both have been created using the same class. Now, what do we mean by this? I have created a class. It is generic. Now I can create any kind of a bird object using that class. I can create any kind of bird using that class. Now I can also say Z is equal to another bird. Okay. Z dot color is equal to White z dot read is equal to span. Okay, now what did I do? We created one more object. We created one more object. This is also bird. Here the color is, it has all the same properties. Color is white and breed is right. So using the same class called bird, I was able to represent three different bird types. And if you notice, what is the good thing that you can see here? If you notice, what is the good thing that if you notice here?
Legs and eyes.
Those are the common things. Common things are there. But if you see here, what is the good part of this is that the data is isolated with respect to object. Data is, see, X object, X data is with a separate memory block for X and its data. Is it like, getting mixed up? No, the data is isolated and it is with respect to the object. Data security, meaning data is isolated and kept separately. This is a different memory location and it has its own data. This is a different memory location, it has its own data. This is a different memory location, it has its own data. Okay, now using object-oriented programming, you have the data security through data isolation. You got the data security through data isolation. Okay, using the same class, you can create multiple objects. Every object is different. Every object has its own memory location and every object has its own data and they are different. You cannot, the two objects are never same. They are always different. Yes, are we clear?
Clear, sir.
Right.
Sir.
Yes, sir.
Now, if I want to represent student, obviously, for example, let's talk about you guys, right? You are students of this Python class. If I treat you as an object, you are all humans. You're all people, right? So my class name, I will just say class student. You're all students, yes?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to say class student. And every one of you have got different name. I'm going to just say none here. We will create object and then assign. Okay, you all have different age. You all have got different probably location. What other properties? Right, your degree is different. Right, your what else can we say? What are the other properties of the student? You must have got some ID. Your IDs are going to be different. Right, your email IDs are different. Right, now this is the student object, right? So every student will have these properties, yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Will there be anybody without a location, without a name, without a age? Right, so everybody has this. Now using
Yes,
the
sir.
students and having a different values, using the student class and having a different values, can I have a different object for each one of you? I
Yes,
can
sir.
create a different objects. This object is for Moment, this is for Rubina, and this is for Harikrupa. This is for Archana, right? I can have your specific details filled into this specific object. right? Now Rubina data will not mix up with Harikrupa's data. Harikrupa's data will not mix up with Momin's data. Data will not mix up with Archana's data. So every one of your data is basically isolated and is in your own specific memory location. They will not never mix up with another object's data. They will never mix up with another object's data. Every object is created independently, and every object's data is maintained in its own memory location, and they will never be mixed. They will never be mixed. Am I clear?
Clear,
Yes,
sir.
sir. Clear, sir.
Clear, sir.
Right. Now with this, through object oriented programming, right? Now you have to tell me what are the advantages of object oriented programming. Right, advantages is mostly
Security
real
of
world objects
data.
can be represented. Yes or no?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Right, were we able to reuse the same class to create multiple objects?
Yes, sir.
Sir.
Yep. Were we able to isolate data with respect to object? Data isolation, right? Or data isolation, or you can call it as data security. Data will not be mixed up, right? And it is very structured. Object oriented program is very structured, meaning if you have a class, you class has certain properties such as, and you have to provide values to those properties, right? And classes can be generic. Classes can be generic, right? So it can, you can be using object oriented programming, we can maximum represent the real world objects. And because of the class definition, using the same class definition, I can create as many objects as I want. Can create as many objects as I want. And every object is independent and every object's data is isolated in its own memory location. And because of which you can achieve data security or data security as well as data isolation, right? And you write this class in such a way that you have given all the properties ahead, and that is why it is structured. And classes can be made generic so that I can create objects in a different objects using the same class. Okay. Now with this, now what is the definition of a class? What is the definition of a class? What is the definition of a class? Can I say this? Can I say this statement? Class is blueprint or can we say this? A class is a blueprint or a prototype of an object,
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
meaning we represented bird. It we have listed all the properties. We represented student. We listed all the properties. Meaning, right? A blueprint. What does a blueprint or a prototype mean? Now imagine the situation, right? So you all know how a house is constructed, right? How is a house constructed? You go to some civil engineer and you will ask, give me a design for my house. Give me a design for my house. Then what he will give is a blueprint of the house. He gives a blueprint of the house. Okay, where should the bedroom come? Where should the entrance be? Where should the hall come? Where should the kitchen come? Right? All of these details will be given in the blueprint.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Now, using that blueprint, you create only one house or you can create many houses.
Can create many.
Right? It is not restricted to one house. Right? Using the same copy, you can create any number of houses. Right? There is no restriction. In the same way, a class is basically a blueprint or a prototype of an object. I want to represent pen. Then I have to list down all the properties of pen, which means I'm creating a blueprint for a pen. I'm creating a blueprint for a pen. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I'm creating a blueprint for a pen. Yeah, so that is the reason a class is a blueprint or a prototype of a object. A class is a blueprint or a prototype of a object. Are you guys with me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right?
Yes, sir.
Right. So, and now a class is a created. A class is created using a keyword called class. Using a keyword called class.
Yes.
Right? A class can contain
Objects.
properties
Yes, sir.
and behaviors. Okay, so far we know what is properties, but what is the behavior here? Right, now if you take a bird properties are what is the color, what are the legs, what are the eyes, right? How many legs, how many wings, what is the color? These are all properties. Now, when I say behaviors, a bird can fly, a bird can eat. These are actions, right? These are actions. How does it fly? How does it eat? How does it walk? Right? So these are all actions. And anything that is action is basically called as behavior. Basically called as behavior. Right? This is right. Basically, a class contains properties and behaviors of an object. Properties and behaviors of an object. Using class, we can create objects. We can create objects. Now, class is a blueprint or a prototype of an object, and using that blueprint or a prototype, I can create any number of objects. We can create any number of objects. Right? Are we clear with this? Now, what is an object? Or let us say, what does an object consist of? An object consists of a state. Object consists of a state. Now, what is a state? Which contains a state has basically properties and behaviors. Statements, object and behaviors. Now, if I take dog, if I take, for example, dog, right? Dog has certain properties. What are the properties? What is the dog name? What is the dog age? What is the dog breed? Right? And what is the dog color? Now, what is the behavior of a dog? But the behavior of a dog can be eating, sleeping, running, can be. See, you see the clear difference between what is the property and behavior. Behavior is more of an action, but properties is a single value, right? A dog color cannot change if it is sleeping, if it is eating, if it is jumping, it doesn't change, right? It is a standard color. It is a standard. It is a one time, right? In the same way, name, age, breed. But whereas eating, it can. It is a action. It is a action. It has to eat. It has to go to food. It has to eat. It has to chew. It has to move the mouth. So there are so many actions that are involved. And whenever there is more than one action that is involved, that can be called as a behavior. The way it walks, the way it barks, the way it runs, right? This is a behavior, right? An object consists of a state, right? A state consists of a properties and behaviors. Now, an object for a Pomerian. If at all, if there is a class called dog, and if I have to create class for a Pomerian, if I have to create an object for a Pomerian, the color would be white, the name would be something, the age would be something, the breed. Not all Pomerian dogs will always have same name, same age, same breed, right? So breed, yes, it can be same. The color, it can be same. The name and age can vary,
Yes, sir.
right? Few Pomerians maybe they extremely they are very active when eating. Few Pomerians will be lazy. Pomerians the way they sleep are different. Few Pomerians the way they sleep are different. The way they run might be different. The way they bark might be different. It can be same and it can also be different as well. It can also be different as well, right? So if because of this, what is an object? If I have to write a statement for an object, how can I write an object? An object is, right? You can say an object, right? An object is created using class which consists of properties and words, right? An object is created, and an object is not, instead of creating a class against an object is a entity. An object is an entity, right? That has state. An object is an entity that has state which consists of certain properties and behavior, certain properties or behaviors, right? Representing a real world object. Now, what is the syntax of an object? What is the syntax of creating an object? So if I have something called class, right, dog, I'm not writing anything in the dog. I can just say pass. Just say pass. We know what is pass, right? Instead of giving the syntax error, we are just, okay, this is an empty class with just no, without any statements. And we just say pass, meaning this is a simple class that has been created without any data in it. Okay. Now, how can I create a object here? I'll use a class name followed by parentheses. This helps us. This creates an object, and that object is assigned into a variable called x. That object is assigned to a variable called x. Okay. Two things. How do I create a class? How do I create a class? Class followed by class name. Class followed by class name. You can have anything in here, properties and behaviors, right? Class followed by a class name. A class name can be any name. There is no restriction that you should have this name, that name. You can create a class name, like just like naming a variable, naming a variable. And now this class, there is no way you can change it, right? So this is a keyword. This is a keyword which is built in. So you have to use this keyword called class to create a class. So I will create a class name and followed by. So if I have to loosely translate this, I can just say class A. Now what is my class name? A. And within that, I'll write certain properties and behaviors. This is how I create a class. Now, how do I create an object? How do I create an object? I will say x is equal to class name followed by parentheses, open and close. This creates an object and it assigns it to a variable called x. In this example, I will say x is equal to a followed by parentheses, open and close. Whatever object is basically create that gets assigned to a variable called x. Are we clear? This is how you create a object. This is how you create an object and this is how you create a class. Are we clear with these concepts?
Clear, sir.
Clear, sir.
Yes, sir.
Clear, sir.
Okay. Now using a class, we can represent any object. We can represent any of the real world object using a class. We can represent any of the real world object. Any of the real world object. A class can contain both behaviors and properties, right? Now, what is a property? It is a singular value. It is a singular value. What is a behavior? It is which involves more than one instruction, which involves more than one instruction. Right. And what is a now? Okay. So these statements are very, very important. Okay. So what is a class? A class is a blueprint, prototype, or a skeleton of an object. A class is created using the keyword called class. A class can contain properties and behaviors of an object. Using class, we can create as many objects as we want. Right. And what is an object? An object is an entity that has a state which consists of properties and behaviors, and properties and behaviors representing a real world object. Right. Now, homework for you guys. Homework is that, right? Create class to represent pen student, right? Pen student. Okay, so let me call it a state. Right? Create a class to represent pen. How do I represent pen? So via the class. How do I represent a student? I have to create a class for it. How do I represent a state? Every state, a country has several states, and each state has certain capital, the number of population, who is the chief minister, who is what, and you can create all of those information. Right? You have to create a class to represent this informations. Okay, for these three real world objects. Okay, create these classes and create objects. Assign data to it. Are we clear? All right. Okay, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Please ensure that you guys complete this, and by the noon tomorrow I should get this assignment in the group by everyone. All right. Thank you guys.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.